Muy buenas tardes, esto es la repregunta, el especial en esta tarde de sábado. Un paseo por ideas que circulan en el mundo y que nos permiten pensar contra nuestros propios argumentos, tan instalados a veces en nuestra realidad local y doméstica. Hoy, Angela Duckworth es una doctora en psicología de la Universidad de Pensilvania, en Estados Unidos, la fundadora y CEO del Character Lab, autora de un libro interesantísimo, Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, la determinación, el poder de la pasión y la perseverancia. ¿Qué importa más en la vida, el coeficiente intelectual o la capacidad de sobreponerse a los obstáculos y seguir adelante, la determinación, las agallas? ¿Por qué alguien muy talentoso puede no necesariamente alcanzar sus logros y por qué alguien medianamente talentoso puede quizás alcanzarlos? En el medio, entre los dos extremos, la posibilidad de trabajar duro, enfocado, recibiendo feedback y practicando con pasión y perseverancia. Esos son los análisis que hace esta psicóloga, que tiene además un podcast interesantísimo que se llama There is no stupid question, no hay preguntas estúpidas. Y por el otro lado, la realidad latinoamericana de Venezuela, este fantasma que circula por la política local argentina en el camino hacia Venezuela. Bueno, Víctor Mijares, politólogo venezolano, profesor, investigador de la Universidad de San Andrés en Colombia, doctor en ciencia política por la Universidad de Hamburgo, analiza muy detalladamente el proceso venezolano, este petroestado. Mijares es un especialista en geopolítica de los estados petroleros. Bueno, Venezuela y su matriz petrolera, cómo influye en la política, cómo se da ese gradual pérdida de calidad con la llegada del chavismo. Esto hoy en la repregunta. Empezamos con Angela Duckworth sobre coeficiente intelectual versus determinación. ¿Dónde está la vía hacia el logro y el éxito personal? Aquí en la repregunta. Thank you so much, Angela Duckworth, for being here today in La Repregunta.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Angela, we all over the world, many people, millions of people have listened, have viewed your talk TED from 2013, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, where the concept of grit was established very clearly. I would like you to explain us this concept and how much important it is so as to learning and improve in life, and how your ideas have evolved from 2013 to today regarding grit and the impact of grit on learning, for example.
When I was growing up, and for much of my life, I thought a lot about talent and, you know, how smart you were and how gifted you would be in anything, in sports or in mathematics. And for a lot of my life, I think I was distracted by talent, thinking, well, if you want to become really successful, then you have to be lucky to be born really talented. And what I've discovered as a scientist is that so much of what you do with your life is not about your talent, but actually about how much you are devoted to what you're doing and how much energy you can accumulate in pursuit of your goals. And this combination of passion and perseverance over really long time periods, you know, not just for a day, but for really, you know, years even, or more, that I think is what I call grit. And I think in addition to talent, and in some cases, maybe even more so than talent, ultimately is what's going to determine, you know, whether you make the most of your opportunities.
Talent within this frame of thinking, talent is the same that IQ?
You know, talent is a very interesting word. It's used all the time, at least in the United States where I am. And I have a suspicion that in many cultures, there is a very similar idea. Now, what is it really? Is it your IQ? Is it something else? I actually think that despite this word being used to describe, Olympic athletes and amazing musicians, I mean, whoever it is that you really admire, you often say like, oh, they're so talented, they're so natural. I think we don't really actually know what we mean exactly by talent, but more directly to your question, I do think for a lot of people, they're just using it kind of synonymously with, being smart or somehow like things come easily to you.
If you have one child that seems to be very intelligent, very smart, and you have another one that is not showing this kind of skills or this character, do you think that which kind of work should you do with each of them so as to try to save a nice life in the future, successful life in the future?
Yeah, and I'll use myself as an example. I think I'm quite smart about psychology, but I'm very, very stupid about history. When I think about myself and when I'm smart and when I'm not smart, it reveals something I think very important that I think applies to the question that you have about, how do we help children to thrive? How do we help them to live as good a life as they can live? I think there are times and there are subjects in which we seem to be just really, really brilliant, in part because we're interested in those things. And we've had some encouragement to be confident in those things. So when it comes to children, I think before we say like, oh, how smart is this one? How smart is this one compared to that one? I think the more useful question would be, when is this child really smart? When are they brilliant? When do they work really hard without having to be scolded and nagged? Okay, when are things more difficult for them? I think that is a more productive question to ask. One of the findings that has been published since my TED Talk and certainly since I started studying grit, which was several years before, of course, the TED Talk, and that is that grit does predict your report card grades in school, but not as well as some other things that also matter, and in fact matter more to just the grades you get across all your subjects in school. For example, your ability to be conscientious, plan ahead, and also to have self-control, to control your impulses. Like, you kind of feel like you want to goof off and waste time, but you also have some hard, studying to do or homework. That actually ends up being more relevant to your grades than your passion and your perseverance for really long-term goals. Now, what's going on here? What I think is this. I think for many people, school is not where they're truly passionate. So they care. I mean, I think almost all students care at some level, but it may not be where their heart is. And it's for that reason that grit, it predicts, but maybe not as well as just your ability to, enact a certain thing that's not as fun as it should be in the moment. And so I think this also tells us that maybe schools could get better at being the place where a child could say, the thing that I care about most during my day, the thing I really want to get good at, that has something to do with school, as opposed to students all over the world thinking like, well, there's what I care about, and then there's school, and they're not the same thing. And I believe that in some ways broadening what kids are doing during the day, so it's not just preparing for, a standardized test or just a kind of, extremely narrow and traditional curriculum. I think that is also, it's not only going to ignite their true passion and get them to work, with enthusiasm, but also it's going to prepare them for the 21st century. Because if there's anything that's obviously true about the future, it's that, people are not going to be asked to do like very routine, narrow things to make a living.
But according to your explanation and the concept of grit, one could in some way misunderstand it Because grit is, from my point of view, it could be related also to self-regulation. Since I'm not very willing to do a task, I'm still persevering because I have to do, and it is my goal to finish it, for example. So is it so separated, one concept from the other?
That is an excellent question, and I'm going to try to give you a clear answer. So I believe that grit is not the same thing as, for example, self-control, which I also study as a scientist. Grit is about what you really meaningfully care about. And by the way, gritty people don't care about everything, right? Yeah. I am truly passionate about psychological science, care about a small number of things, and that's where I apply my grit. Self-control, you need every hour, right? I mean, I have to use self-control so that I can wear my mask, which, is kind of uncomfortable and gets a little sticky. I have to use self-control to brush my teeth, maybe, if I have to, oh gosh, I feel like I need to floss. I mean, we need self-control in so many ways. And it's not that self-control isn't important, but I think grit is really relevant to those long-term pursuits that are personally meaningful to us as an individual.
There is this very famous rule that the 10,000 hours of practicing, you could develop a hidden talent. Does it work like this? Just practicing so as to flourish our skills and talents?
This summer, I don't know whether your audience knows, but this summer, very sadly, Anders Ericsson, who was the cognitive psychologist behind the 10,000 hour rule, really that's a paraphrasing of his research. He passed away unexpectedly and somewhat young. He was in his early 70s. And it's a wonderful way to honor his life by saying, what did he really mean? What did he really recommend? And that number 10,000 hours is from one study of German musicians who were being studied at a conservatory. And what Anders Ericsson had done was identify the best musicians, the musicians who were, not the best, but very good. And then the last group, which was still very good, but not quite as good as the middle group. And what characterized the truly best musicians in this study was that they had accumulated thousands of hours, in round numbers, an average of about 10,000 of a certain kind of practice. And what was so remarkable about this is not that it was the hours, but it was the kind of practice that was accumulated. And Anders liked to call this deliberate practice, meaning the practice that true experts do is different from other people. So it's not just about the quantity, you have to get to 10,000, but really about the quality. And in particular, what Anders found is that the best musicians have very specific goals for when they're practicing, and they, really practice with full attention. In fact, many of them would report practicing with concentration alone, because that's when you can really be absorbed in what you're doing and not paying attention to other people in the room, and finally getting feedback. And that ended up, I think, being his major contribution as a scientist, to show what's possible for people to do when they do this kind of high quality practice.
So you have to be focused, you have to be a very clear goal in the horizon, so as this practice turn into a qualitative, high quality practice. Goal
That's
is
right.
important.
It's kind of, the goal is important, the concentration is important, the feedback is important. And I think Anders would want everyone to know that most often this is done with the support of a teacher. Not that your teacher is in the room while you practice. In fact, usually nobody's in the room while you practice. But the teacher helps you figure out, what is the goal? What should I practice today? How should I practice it? And also, it's often the teacher who gives you the feedback. Like, let me show you. Or like, what I heard. And now most of us are not musicians, by the way. And I'm not a musician. And I'm not a chess player. And you could ask, how does this work in our everyday life, right? I think the principles are really what's important. When you try to do something, do you have in your mind like a mental picture of what it is that you're trying to do that you can't yet do? Now, when you try, are you fully trying, or is your attention divided? Are you texting and also listening to music and sort of talking to somebody, or like, are you really focused and trying? And then finally, are you really getting feedback? I mean, are you asking for feedback? And when I hear that feedback, of course, I'm going to be defensive and say, oh, well, but then I have to get over that and say, oh, you know what? That's so valuable, because now she's given me a goal for the next time I do this, the next time I practice.
This relationship where some people have some kind of power, because have the power of giving a feedback, influencing you, maybe making you feel not that good, that well. So this should be a kind of caring relationship, love in a very open way of thinking love. Among teachers, for example, in the school, no matter if it is the children teacher of adolescents, professor of adolescents in secondary school, this caring, this very deeply caring relationship is the starting point to develop this, this grit, this willing to improve.
I think I couldn't have said it better than you just did. A trusting, caring, genuinely caring relationship is the foundation for all good things, honestly. Whether we're talking about school and children with their teachers, or we're talking about families and children with their parents, or frankly, if you're just talking about adults and, one person who works for another person or with another person, it's all based on trusting, caring relationships. When you tell me one thing that I can do better, if I don't trust you, if I don't feel like, you know what, she just wants to help me, and so she's offering me a gift of this feedback, I'm going to reject everything that you say. The same thing with kids. If the teacher says, well, here's all the feedback on your essay, or here are all the marks that I, wrote on here about, the math that you got wrong. If the child doesn't feel like, well, this is from somebody who cares about me, who really wants the best for me, then they're going to ignore everything that is said. And I'm not saying it's an easy thing to develop these relationships, but I think just understanding, I think the first goal of every teacher all around the world this year is to say, before anything else comes my relationship with this student, because nothing can come after unless I have that. No mathematics, no writing, nothing unless they trust me and they know I care about them.
Very interesting. Let's move this conversation to this real world of the coronavirus pandemic, with children all over the world, adolescents all over the world, trying to learn something and to develop their talents through computers, looking at screens, because schools are, in many, many countries, are closed. What are the main lessons that you are gathering after almost half a year of this pandemic?
Yeah, and the pandemic is truly awful, and we're all doing our best. Here are some lessons learned. I was actually teaching in the spring of earlier this year at the university level, and the pandemic happened literally exactly in the middle of my course. So I got to teach before pandemic live, and then I had to teach remotely, through video for the second half. I've also been talking to my colleagues who've had similar experiences, and many of my colleagues are actually behavioral scientists. So we're all trying to understand the best way to teach and interact with our students, but we're also trying to apply what we know about human nature. And here are some lessons learned. One is that what you are striving to do, I think, is actually the same in terms of that relationship building that we mentioned a moment ago. Not only one-to-one, you with your student, but also among the students in your class. Then if you ask the question, is it possible? Can I develop a kind of a personal relationship, like when it's in 2 dimensions and it's on a little screen? And I think the answer is it's not easy, but it is possible. In fact, one of my colleagues every year would do an in-person kind of like camp for students who are learning about, computer science, et cetera. And this year they had to do it virtually. Well, the data came back from like how many students completed the course, what their ratings were, how engaged they were. Everything, in fact, in the pandemic was better. And the reason was they had taken the opportunity to create small groups of students working together. They allowed the students to name their own team. They gave them icebreakers to like encourage some kind of personal connection and a little bit of vulnerability. They also made other pedagogical adjustments. Like, well, when you're teaching virtually, you can allow people to maybe watch a lecture 3 times on their own if that's what they take. But somebody else who doesn't need it, they only need to watch it once. So in a way, if you approach the truly awful pandemic as an opportunity to innovate, not only in terms of relationship building among students, between teachers and students, but also pedagogically, you might find that 2021 and beyond is just a better educational experience for all the lessons we learned in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Is it a mistake, I think, to trying to move the break education, real place, real space education, without any kind of translation to the virtual world? Because in Argentina there is a huge debate. Schools are having closed all the year, and they are not coming back, it seems, this school year. So in many schools, mainly high school, professors are teaching lessons in the same way that they used to do in the classroom, in a very asymmetrical way, just giving a lesson. Sometimes it's just a link to a lesson and a kind of task that the students should write for the next week, without any kind of these sophisticated and more innovative ideas or tools that you are describing.
I think expecting students to click on a link at some point to watch a video of you doing what you used to do in the classroom is the least creative and probably a pretty ineffective way of teaching. For one thing, I will just say that when you say, whenever you want to, at some point, could you click on this link? It's different from when you show up and everyone else is there and it's at a certain time, and you can't just whenever you want to, that one thing is that this creates like a huge desire to procrastinate, right? Because it's like, well, I don't really feel like doing it now. I don't really feel like doing it now either, right? As opposed to when you're in real school and you're just sort of going to class and it's, you can't choose to defer or procrastinate on your math class because it's just happening. So that's one way in which just click on this link and at some point you get to watch this video of me standing in a big room where I would have taught you. Or I think that's another opportunity. Like when I say that it's the teacher as the center where the students are just passively sitting there. That's very old fashioned. And even before the pandemic, the most innovative educators were trying to find ways to flip the classroom so that it's not just the teachers 95% of the talking, the students are just sitting there passively, maybe 5% of the time, probably less for any given student. They're really engaging and participating. When you have to teach in the pandemic, you might think, what do we know about flipped classrooms? Well, technology does make it possible to, really change the ratio so that, for example, maybe the teacher's comments are a shorter amount of time and they're very well rehearsed and well delivered. But then you use breakout rooms and other ways for chat or whatever, for students to be actively engaging, talking with each other, for example.
Angela, there is this famous book of Yuval Harari, the intellectual...
Sapiens?
Exactly. And he's very focused on the idea that Homo sapiens have evolved over the years and centuries because of, and not, among many things, because of the possibility of being in contact with other Homo sapiens, and communication is very important for our brain development. Do you think that virtual reality is virtual remote education could in some way could replace the real contact that children and adolescents have at the school?
I don't know. I don't know to what extent, this virtual learning experience, which is is, you know, two dimensions. It's also like when you're interacting like we are, right? Like I have to be looking at this camera. You have to be it's very constrained, right? When you're moving in 3 dimensions with people, you know, you look this way, it has a completely different feel to it than this kind of, you know, and by the way, when you think about students spending their whole school day like this, you know, it does make you wonder, like, how can that approximate the kind of social interactions that we evolved to have? So I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody really knows. Yeah. One thing that I worry about, though, in terms of what might be missing, what is likely missing in these kinds of scripted, you know, well thought out interactions, but they're very constrained, is spontaneity. And one of the educators that I admire most said to me, you know, in the early months of the pandemic, he runs a school in New York City. And he said, you know, one thing that you miss in this kind of like, well, you know, your Zoom call is at, you know, 1 o'clock, or, you know, like, okay, I want you to, it's spontaneity, the kind of chance encounters, the sort of casual conversations that you weren't planning to have, but you had. And I wonder about that, not only children with children, but children with adults and adults with adults. Now, having recognized that, maybe there's a way we can figure out how to get a little bit more of that spontaneity. But I do see that as a major, you know, feature of human interaction that is not obvious to me, like how we'll get back to that.
Angela, do you think that over these months of pandemic, teenagers mainly have been more impacted when this virtual connection is not working in terms of procrastination or in terms of depression?
As you are probably well aware, measures of anxiety and depression and general stress are up in every demographic group and in, you know, everywhere you measure it. When you ask about teenagers in particular, I think, you know, first of all, the adolescent years, right? Now, those are by definition the years between childhood and adulthood. They are the most emotional years of your life. And any of us who can remember what we were like when we were teenagers will probably nod their head and say, oh yeah, you know, the highs are higher, the lows are lower. It's extremely tumultuous. And that is, in a way, developmentally, the way all of us, you know, it wasn't just us. It's just all human adolescents experience this kind of roller coaster of emotions. It's probably something to do with as we transition from childhood to adulthood and we become very sensitive to our friendships and our romantic interests. It's overall, it's painful, but it's an adaptive transition as we take our place and find our way. I think it's another feature of adolescence that we really want independence. You know, when you're a teenager, you don't want anyone to tell you what to do. I mean, in even the most trivial, you don't want anyone to tell you what to eat. You don't want them to tell you, you know, what to drink with your breakfast. You don't want to tell them what to do with your time. And so I think the pandemic has been especially hard for teenagers because they are an extremely emotional developmental stage in their life. Their highs are high, but their lows can be very low. And there is this need for independence that for many teenagers has been sort of shut down because you have to live with your parents. And not only do you have to live with your parents are home all day, you know, telling you what to do. So I, you know, have 2 teenage girls and I can see it and I can feel it. And it's actually not only hard for them, it's hard for me as a parent. What's the answer to that? There's no easy answer, but just even to understand that developmentally, this is going to be really hard for teenagers and their parents. I think to me, just reminding myself that of course it's hard and especially hard has been somewhat helpful.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Angela Duckworth, for being here with us in La Repregunta El Especial. It was a pleasure, really.
I really enjoyed this conversation. Every question you asked was so thoughtful. Thank you.
Well.